I'm Cole Haddon, and welcome back to 5 a.m. Story Talk. Today's guest is a screenwriter, director, and producer. She made her directorial debut in 2017 with the extraordinarily funny and moving coming-of-age story, The Edge of 17, and she followed that up in 2023 with an adaptation of a beloved book from her childhood, Judy Blume's Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. I'm talking about my friend, the brilliant, infuriatingly talented Kelly Freemon Craig, and I can't wait to kick off Season 2 of 5 a.m. Story Talk with her, talking about cinema, her filmmaking, and trying to find something true in her work.
I really like the feeling on the page of scaring myself a little, like embarrassing myself a little. Like, ooh, that's a little too much. Am I allowed to say that?
Hey, welcome back, Story Talkers. You might have noticed I took a few weeks off there after Season 1 of this podcast wrapped up. I needed some time off to focus on family and mental health and catch up on some other things on my to-do list. As it turns out, launching a podcast during an interstate move, as I did earlier this year, is a lot of work, especially if you also have to teach yourself how to do things like record them and edit them and promote them. Like I said, a lot of work. But I think I've finally got this one-person show worked out, including some new art and a brand new theme song to start every 5 a.m. Story Talk episode. It comes to us by way of my good friend Carey Brothers, whose work you've heard in films and TV a lot over the years, even if you don't know his name yet. I just love the vibe this song brings to the show. What do you think of it? If you dig it, check out the show notes for a link to his song Cool City, which we borrowed it from. Now, in the past, I've spent a lot of time chatting at the top of my podcast eps, but that's going to change going forward, as I'm going to pour a lot of that personal energy into the plug I'm going to share with you on the first and third Monday of every month. The first one is coming your way next week, so be sure to check it out. It'll be labeled 5 a.m. Real Talk, and I'm going to use it as a way to communicate more directly with you about everything from the art I'm loving right now to what I'm struggling with as an artist and sometimes just as a person. And I'm struggling a lot these days, like most of you. 2025 is, it's not good. So let's skip any more small talk and just jump right in. Today's guest is filmmaker Kelly Freemon Craig. And hilarious, true, raw, and fearless are just some of the words I'd use to describe her storytelling. I'm going to drop a couple of links to her scripts in the show notes, which you should check out. As I reminded my friend after our chat, they are just a joy to read. They're literary, punchy, and economical, but not sparse, which I think is a bad habit a lot of modern screenwriting has developed. Words matter in Kelly's scripts, both the ones you read and the ones that show up on screen. She and I are going to lean hard into how she writes, how she finds her stories, and how she writes with her body, not just her head. But Kelly, being Kelly, which means endlessly fascinated by other writers' processes, came to our conversation with a lot of questions of her own. So expect an energetic back and forth. When this episode wraps, you're going to want to stick around. If you're new to this podcast, I ask my guests to return for a bonus episode to discuss a seminal piece of art from their lives as a way to understand them and their storytelling, but also the piece of art a little better. I describe them as mini masterclasses, but what you learn from them will not always be what the subject matter suggests. Kelly picked one of my favorite 80s comedy dramas to talk about. Remember when Hollywood made those? She went with Broadcast News, written and directed by James L. Brooks, who became her mentor early in her career and has produced both of her films. Okay, I think that's it for now, except to say, if you enjoy this episode, I hope you take the time to follow 5 a.m. Story Talk so you can listen to the rest of Season 2 coming your way. I'm very proud of the guest list I've curated for us. Upcoming guests include Black Phone 1 and 2 co-writer and director Scott Derrickson, Humans, A Monstrous History author Dr. Sareka Davies, and DEI pioneer Karen Horn. There are definitely some extraordinary conversations coming your way, Story Talkers. And now, let me introduce you to my friend, filmmaker Kelly Freemon Craig. Welcome, Kelly. It's so good to see you. Thank you for being here today.
I'm so excited to be here with you.
So I have to tell you, I just rewatched both Edge of 17 and Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. And I cried several times watching both of them. They're so authored, so clearly personal to you, and yet they never feel like they weren't made for a wide audience. They also feel like cinematic miracles given the kind of movies that Hollywood is largely making today. Do you ever feel you were born a couple decades late to make the kind of films you really care about?
Oh God, that's such a good question. And you know what? It's funny. It's first of all, that's so nice. Everything that you just said is so sweet and so nice. But it's interesting because I feel like I have been saying for the last year, I'm like, oh man, they just don't make them like they used to. Like I just have this feeling of like every time I'm watching a movie, specifically from the 80s and 90s, where I just feel it's like I feel at home.
Hmm.
I'm like, yes, this is it. This is it. I miss that. I miss that style of movie. And I think you're right. They're fewer and further between, unfortunately.
Your passion for that era, what I would wonder is that because you grew up with it? Do you have the same relationship to great dramas of the 70s and 60s, or do you feel the 80s and the 90s that they crack something when it comes to Hollywood?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that sometimes I wonder that because I think that there's something about the art that you consume in your youth and specifically like when you're coming of age or like in your teens and 20s, it's so formative that it gets in and it stays there in a different way, I feel like. And so sometimes I wonder, like, did I just love that because it was the thing that was around, like in the way that like there's songs from my youth that I still feel like I hear them and I just am like instantly taken back. Like it's like I have the ache, that I had when I listened to that song and I had a crush on somebody, or whatever. I'm like, I'm right back there. So sometimes I wonder, is it sensory? But the thing is, when I return to those movies, certain movies in particular, like, and I'm talking about like Cameron Crowe and Jim Brooks and Alexander Payne stuff. I mean, I know he's a little bit later, but like there are certain movies from that time that just I rewatch them and I'm like, this is everything I want to do. This is the North Star, I still feel that way. So it doesn't feel like it never feels like it loses anything.
Is there any part of you that mulls abandoning Hollywood to direct smaller indie films where you might be able to do more of those types of films?
Like I actually feel like, knock on wood, I'm able to do that now. I don't know how long I'll be able to, but like the next thing that I'm working on is something that is, it's not a superhero movie. It's not a big, it's not a big tentpole movie. It's a dramedy, and so I feel like I think with the streamers and with, things like that, there are opportunities to still make those films. I think like the bigger question is actually, it's harder to get them on people's radar because I feel like there's so many, I don't know if you experienced this, but now I'm constantly hearing about movies where I'm like, how have I never even heard of that? Like there was a time where I knew everything. I knew every show that was out, every movie that was out. You just knew. And now I feel like I'm constantly surprised that, oh, that came out. How did I not even hear about that?
I write about this quite a bit. It isn't that you're ignorant of it, that you haven't learned about it. It's also that what's out there the quantity is so great, there's no chance you can share things with other people the way that
Yes.
you used to. And so the zeitgeist moments become nearly impossible because those
Exactly.
movies in the 80s, we all watched those movies. We all have a common
Exactly.
language as storytellers,
Yes.
as people.
Exactly. There were these cultural touchstones, and you could, exactly what you're saying. You could talk about something around the water cooler,
Yes.
but now you can't. Now it's because we're all being fed these different algorithms, so we're all getting different things. There isn't those common cultural touchstones, and not in the same way. It feels like the only, like, I don't even know. I mean, it's like very few things actually break through in the zeitgeist. And it feels like, I think with everything political too going on, like it feels like it's always just, it's just politics, which I think we're all just exhausted by. So
I wanted to ask about Edge of 17 and Are You There, God? Because they're both these coming of age films about young women struggling with many of the same issues. Both turn to God at some point, hoping for some kind of help out of their existential crises, only to find out they're on their own. And so I've actually decided Are You There, God is a spiritual prequel to Edge of 17 Does it feel like that to you? And is there a sequel in the future to complete your own trilogy of coming
Yes.
of age?
Yeah, it is. First of all, it's interesting that you would like touch on that particular aspect of those films because interestingly, Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. Like the reason I made it was actually that spiritual questioning, that sort of like trying to figure out if there is something larger and not being sure and talking to something and hoping that it's protecting you or guiding you, but not being sure whether you're just talking to yourself. That is like always, I feel like I'm like moving through life constantly with that question at the center of myself. Like, is there more than what we can see,
Mm.
So a lot of the reason that I've wanted to make that film was because of that. It actually wasn't even so much the coming of age part of it. What got me when I read the book when I was 11, and then what got me again was really this kid trying to figure out if there is a force greater than us, like orchestrating all of this, or if she's all alone, like that's was so interesting to me. So I didn't even realize that until you mention it, that I do have Nadine like calling out to God and being like, please help me. But yeah, I think it's something in me. I think it's my instinct to do that and then wonder if I'm nuts,
Mm.
And I guess I'm like spiritually agnostic. I'm like constantly leaning and searching, and some days I think, oh, I think I have a sense of how the whole universe works, and other days I think I have absolutely no idea. I have no idea, and it feels really, really bleak and awful. But I'm like, that search is very much like at the center of me.
Is the manifestation of this question in Edge of 17, but also, I guess, the interest in Are You There, God, is that just an expression of who you are, or you trying through art to actually answer those questions? And I'm not sure if I explained that clearly, but there's a difference between just, I don't know, that's who I am, and so it shows up in my work, to I'm actively using art to try to answer the most difficult questions in my life.
I think I think I'm actually doing it not to so much answer it as I am to just explore my own. It's just there is gosh, Charlie Kaufman said this thing about writing. He said, go where your energy is. And I remember reading that years ago in my 20s when I first started writing. And so I actually think it's that.
Hmm.
It's that I'm just going where my energy is. Like it's just that's what I'm thinking about. It's just I'm walking through the grocery store wondering. Like I don't know. I've just always been like a seeker,
Hmm.
of trying to make sense of all this. Like what are we all doing here? Like that is just I don't know. I'm so curious and interested by it all. So I think it's that. I think it's just what's on my mind.
Hmm. I find, especially through fiction, films are a little bit trickier, but it becomes a way for me to articulate something that was abstract previously that I don't know about myself in some way. So
Interesting.
it's a bit more like therapy, that when they repeat something back after you've said it for 8 sessions in really abstract ways you would never, sew together in your mind. But then you read it and you think, where'd that come from? Oh, that's me. Well,
Yes.
that's weird. All right. Hello.
Do you feel like when you start writing about something, do you have that experience where it's like, I think some writers have this experience, and I know I do, where it's like, I don't know what I think until I've written it. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes. Oh, I think also think about the project perhaps, but also think about myself. Things get revealed that through the characters, I tend to place myself in all of my characters.
Uh-huh.
They're not other people. They're somehow expressions of myself. And so when those characters do something terrible or do something wonderful, I
Yeah.
find pieces of myself that maybe I wasn't aware of.
Yes.
And if I'm aware of it too much, I realize it's probably not very good on the page. So I'm controlling it versus whatever unconscious thing is happening.
Yes. Yeah. I no, I hear it's almost like you're drawn in by it's the mystery of it
Mm,
kind of draws you in rather than consciously making the decision to make the character do XYZ and figure it all out.
yes.
But so you're saying it's an experience where a character does or says something and you go, "Whoa,
Mm.
what? What is that about? Like, do I have that in me?"
Yeah. Some writers, I think, will tell me that the characters are external. You're writing characters, and for me, I end up just seeing myself, and I think, oh,
Yes.
what terrible thing in me it made the character do that thing. So let's reflect on that for a moment. And
Right. Yes. That's so interesting. Yeah. Yeah. I also think there's something so cathartic about it because it was so much fun for me to write The Edge of 17 because Nadine is not how I am, but she is
mm,
also how I am, you know? So there is a part of me that's her. So it was letting a part of myself like run free and just get to say every obnoxious
mm.
thing, you know? It was so fun to just let that person have the floor for a little bit, you know?
As a woman writing that character, knowing how female-led coming-of-age stories tend to go, I felt you never censored yourself. There was the self-destructive behavior, the things that normally I feel like Hollywood would push back on, would blunt the edges of. No, young women cannot be that well-rounded. They don't think such terrible things and put themselves in such terrible positions in these ways. So it felt so raw and true and not, yeah, guarded in any way.
You know, so I like the feeling and I know we're going to talk a little bit more about like kind of writing somatically,
Mm,
writing with your body as much as with your head, but I really like the feeling on the page of scaring myself a little, like embarrassing myself a little. Like, ooh, that's a little too much. Am I allowed to say that? I like to, when I'm writing, get that feeling of like, oh, I'm going too far, I think. You know, it's just it keeps it exciting for me. And I like feeling like I'm coming right up to the edge and I'm definitely always trying to ask myself, could it be truer? Is it really, really, really true? What could make it even truer?
mm.
You know, like where you're just stripping everything away. And it's like when I get into that like messy, gross, you know, yeah, like these unattractive moments where you're just raw and your ugliest self, like that for some, there's something about just letting that out that is weirdly exciting and
Mm.
cathartic to me when I'm writing. So like I'm looking for that feeling in my body. It's like gives me a little buzz.
But truth runs or collides with your culture, correct? And I think that's where the reference to censorship came in. We're talking about young women in both of
Hmm.
these films, largely for an American audience. They're set in
Yeah.
America, and in a country that is increasingly pushing back against women's sexuality after decades of progress, not even great progress, I feel. So I get to Are You There, God? And I see, I think it's 13-year-old girls looking at an illustration of a penis and laughing about it and referencing it. And it feels transgressive, something that is so mundane.
Yes.
It's mundane, and yet it's
Yes.
transgressive.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. It feels like, oh,
Yeah, well, how'd that happen? Did somebody give a note on that
yeah.
to cut that scene?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I think you actually may be onto like why it's exciting to me
Mm,
to put those things on film because I'm like, this is so normal. We all do this. Like, why don't we talk about it or say it?
mm,
It's silly to me. So there's something about just saying it that I feel like is, yeah, I don't know, is just as liberating.
mm.
And also when I see those moments in the films, I'm just grateful. I don't know. I was rewatching broadcast news last night because I know we're gonna talk about that. And there's this little moment. It's just like the tiniest moment, but I'm like, God, this is it. This is part of why I love this movie. But it's just a little moment where Holly Hunter is trying to seduce the William Hurt character, and he kind of rejects her, and then she's mad and sort of says something really cutting to him, and then he leaves, and she's so frustrated with herself that she walks back in and she lifts up her skirt and she rips off her pantyhose and throws them across the room.
Yes.
And there's something about that moment where she just rips off her panty, like you're not allowed to hike up your skirt or rip off your pantyhose, but that's exactly what you want to do when you're frustrated. You want to get those fucking things off. And like I actually said to myself, how did Jim Brooks know the pantyhose feel that way? That you're just like, get that off of me, But it's so true. It's just so true. It's just a little moment where it's just real, It's just a perfect little detail. So
I think it's not even just a wonderful detail like some of what we're talking about in your work. Those moments of truth create trust between the viewer and the storyteller. And I think that's part of why we love these films. When things feel false, when they feel manufactured or just some sort of weird simulacra, you're now copying 8 other films. The audience tunes out. They don't want to remember that for the next 20 years. They already had the experience with some other film.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. When you write, do you get that same, like what I'm talking about, that same sort of like little buzz where when you've written something where you're like, ooh, there's a little, like when you were talking about writing characters when, who suddenly do something bad or do something where you're like, ooh, that's pretty dark. Is there a sort of thrill? Is there like, how does it feel for you? Or how do you know, like, ooh, that's dark, but I feel like I'm onto something.
I think it feels very similar to that if a warning bell goes off, that typically is my puritanical childhood. It's in some way, it's my parents who covered my eyes for breasts, but didn't cover my eyes when somebody's head was getting shot off. And so I wonder endlessly how I'm subverting that sort of what I think is a very toxic mentality. And so I'm looking for moments where the things people aren't saying, that the truth about what's really going on in suburbia manifests. Or whatever situation, not just suburbia. But I'm looking for the thrill, the surprise that shows up on page. That's something I haven't seen before. Oh, that's an emotion people don't acknowledge in some way, but I know that's real in some way. And it can be scary. And then whether I give it to my wife or my agents, if there's any sense of pushback, I start thinking, oh, I'm onto something there. That if
like, ooh, that's
if it feels problematic, why is that? Why do you think it's problematic? I've seen worse things than this go on in the real world. So I'm depicting a false version of the real world just so you're more comfortable. I don't know if I explained that well, but it's a thrill. It's the part where I'm trying to find something, as you said, true. If that,
and a bundle of contradictions. I feel like often it's just a mess under there. Like there's nothing's clean and clear.
Well, that drives me crazy about characters I see on screen when characters just are straight lines, and then they get they have a conflict at the beginning they need to get over, and by the end they clear that hurdle, and now they're a slightly changed person versus the rest of us. We're giant messes.
Yes, totally. When you're writing, how much of these things are you thinking about before you've actually put pen to paper or, put your fingers on the keyboard? How, like, in terms of theme or in terms of, coming right up to the edge of things, like how much of that is happening in your head before you sit down versus something that you stumble upon in the writing that sort of just comes out of the process and suddenly you're aware of what your story is or what your theme is?
My themes tend to be established beforehand, and the theme tends to establish what the idea is in some way.
So you start with theme.
Yes, I start with something I want, that I'm struggling with. I want to play around with an idea. So I start off from that jumping off point, and then what happens after that becomes more revelatory most of the time.
Yes.
But I know what I want to ask.
That's really interesting. So what I would love to know is how do you know? How do you know that, like, when you've stumbled upon a theme, how do you know it's worth writing about? How do you know I have to write about this? Like, what is it that happens for you that clicks together that because there's a million themes. So what makes you know that that's what you have to write about?
That's a good question. I'm going to want you to answer that as well. For me, I think I do a lot of experimenting. I have a lot of questions. I don't have just the 2 or 3 I'm preoccupied with today. And so I find ideas. I tend to write a first act in the case of screenplays. And if it's not clicking for me, if I don't feel like this is the right way to talk about this idea, I throw it out and I come back to that idea in some other form.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah.
So I'm very happy to experiment to find my way to the right scripts. And that's in the spec side of things. When you're pitching ideas, I think those tend to be a lot more worked out beforehand.
Right, yeah.
But if it's mine, even with novels, I know what I want to ask. I start, and if it doesn't work, I've acquired, I guess, maturity at this point to accept that I wasted a month of work. That's okay.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
Maybe it'll come back in 2 years or 5 years in a different form.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. You sort of have to put it on its feet for you to know, okay, this is worth writing about.
What about you?
So I have a very feeling process with everything that I'm with writing and directing and all of it. So I'm like, I have to, when I've found a theme, it actually has to give me a physical ache. Like I have to feel it in the center of myself and go, ow. Oh yeah, I know that. Oh, ouch, ouch, ouch. Ooh, ooh, ooh. That's a tender spot, And then I know that's worth writing about. Like there's something there for you to explore. You have enough juice, within you to dig into this. And then I'm trying to find the story. Or it doesn't necessarily always happen that way. The current thing that I'm working on, it happened that way. Like I knew what I wanted to write about, and I could feel that, like, oof, that's sort of like, I don't know, there's just friction within me,
I like that description.
Yeah. And so but I didn't have the story, and I didn't have it for a long time. And I searched and nothing quite worked. And then I sort of, I just sort of went, I just got to live my life, like you can't, I don't know where this belongs. And then when I was living my life, something happened where I was like, there it is, there's the story, so now that theme has a home, but yeah, for me, it's very feeling based and very sensory. And even when I'm like, once I figured out the story that I wanted to tell, when I'm first mapping out the shape of it, my outline is actually feelings. So it's not like I don't necessarily know this happens, that happens, da, 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 da. I just know, okay, like I start to feel like this, and then this happens, and then I start to feel a little nervous, and then blah, 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 blah. And then I'm like, oh, I'm desperate for this to happen, but it's not, like there's just a feeling in my body that I know I want to have, but I don't know how to get there exactly yet. And then I'm trying to create scenes that give me that feeling. So in my head, it's almost like almost like a little like concerto of feelings, and then I'm trying to like take all the ideas and make them sort of work together to like hit those notes. You know?
It sounded like a symphony that you were describing.
Yeah, it's a weird, I think, like, and I always wonder like how many we all work so differently, like how we actually put something together. So I was like, it's always interesting to me to talk to other writers and understand how much of my process is the same or different from other writers' processes, you know? And do you have a sort of feeling when you're writing and you know you're onto something good? Is there a feeling that you get in your body that tells you yes? And on the flip side, do you get the nope, something in here just says no, you know? Even if you don't intellectually know why, but something in you tells you, like physically tells you,
So when I know something is good, at least by my definition, I can't speak to how the rest of the world responds to my work, but when something feels true and right to me, I have that feeling, and it is intense. I need to get back to it as much as possible. It disrupts sleep. It's difficult to leave because I'm thinking about the emotions, which is I really like that observation. I often describe what I've started doing in the last 5 years or so as more tone poems. When I outline, you know, it's I'm looking for those
that's a good way of explaining
feelings.
it. Yes,
How do the
exactly.
two scenes, maybe the plot moves through them, but how do they marry next to each other to create a feeling? I know that's more of a director's role, we're told, that they're supposed to be doing this on screen, but on the page, I want to control people's emotions.
Absolutely.
And when something's
Yeah.
not working, I think this isn't feeling right. You know, that I'm doing the job.
Yes.
I know I'm doing the job well, but there's something, dishonest in some way. And it becomes a chore. I think that's what my
Yes.
body tells me.
No, yeah. Totally. Yes. Yeah. For me, my signal is always like I have a restlessness in me that feels like that feels like an impatience, you know? And it's but I know it's dull. Like I know I'm bored. This is dull. I don't know. Or it feels like the feeling in my body is almost like a round or square peg round hole. It's like that feeling, like you know? And very often, like my body knows before my head knows. You know what I mean? Like I can't even intellectually. It takes a while for me to intellectually explain why it didn't work, but I'm always like trying to go back to my body and being like, do I have that feeling? Like what's happening in here? Am I leaning forward? Am I clenched? Is my breath held? Am I, like, do I have this? Or is my heart pounding? Like I have to have all those feelings, and if I don't, then I know something's wrong, you know? And so, and I start to do that thing. I start to feel like I lean back and it starts to feel like you said, like a chore. And that's when I know, oh shit, I'm off base. Like I don't know where, but I'm lost in the wilderness and I got to find my way back, you know?
So you don't abandon for the most part. This is a compass that lets you know you have left the story behind and you need to return to the path.
I realize like I can't go very far if I maybe 2 scenes. And if I am feeling that way, I'm like, nope, I know something's wrong. So I'm like, I stop right there and I'm like, something's wrong. I don't know what it is, but I will figure it out because I could tell this thing's saying, nope, I don't know. So I'm trying to solve the puzzle, trying to find the fix.
It's interesting. I think I probably last 2 scenes as well, and then I just keep going back. So that rule, there must be something wrong in the first act, and I keep going back and fixing it rather than moving forward.
Yeah.
And then I realize I'm now stuck in a loop.
Yeah.
When there's no forward momentum anymore.
Right.
I have an incredibly polished 40 pages that will never go anywhere.
Right. Yes, totally. Yeah. But often I think you're right. A lot of times what's happening now, 40 pages later, is actually the reason you're stuck is something that happened on page 2, you know?
With Edge of 17, which is wholly original, what was the friction for you, and how did you know? Do you remember how you knew I have to write this story? And were there any examples of a different version of it where your body said, no, 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 stop now?
So originally, so there's sort of two parts to it. Originally, I had written a different version. The first version was much more of a straight comedy. It was, it was a joke every third line. And it wasn't truthful, and it wasn't until, but I knew sort of what I wanted to say, but not really, it was just, I was having fun getting laughs. And then Jim Brooks, who produced it, said, you know what, go spend some time with teenagers. Just go spend some time with them and just see like what it's like. Because oftentimes you can't, like, you'll glean stuff from those interviews that you cannot make up on it. You just can't make up. Like, you can't get these details any other way than just like hanging out. And so I did that. So I spent a few months just like interviewing, I don't know, dozens of teenagers, and like went to a high school dance and like everything, just like being a fly on the wall. And that experience made me realize, like, oh man, this age is funny, but it's really dark and hard. And like all of the self-consciousness and insecurity and all of it like came rushing back to me. And I just remembered all the feelings. And I was like, that if I want to really truthfully capture this age, I've got to dig more deeply into the, like, try to represent this more truthfully, like this age. And what came to me, what really hit me about that age is how when I was going through something tough, how absolutely convinced I was that I was all alone, that I was like the only person in the entire universe who had ever felt this bad or struggled this much or was this lost. And there was something about that, like, just loneliness, lonely in a crowd, feeling like you're the only one who's, like everybody's okay except me, that sort of feeling that was the friction point for me. Like I could feel into that and remember that feeling. And also, like, I think like as an adult and, in my 20s, and I mean, there are plenty of times where you could feel, I could feel that. I could still feel that sometimes. I could still feel like I'm in a room and I sort of feel like I'm on the other side of the glass for some reason. I can't even explain it, but it's somehow like everyone's here together, but I'm on the outside of the glass and I don't even know why. It's just some weird self-consciousness thing or something. But so it was that I wanted to write about. And then I knew that I wanted the answer to be that she isn't alone in her pain, that everybody is screwed up in their own way. And that doesn't solve her issue, but it takes the sting out of it to know that you're not the only one who's struggling. You know what I mean?
Yes,
like, it's really easy to just like look at everybody else's life and think everybody else has it figured out. Like, I'm just the fuck up, But when you realize, like, no, we're all a mess. There's something, like, at least when I realized that, like, something relaxed in me. I remember realizing that somewhere later in college, and it was actually like reading great writers. It was like, oh, this person feels as shitty as I do, or like, and it was like a writer that was writing 100 years ago or whatever. And there was something about like the timelessness of, of like our shared pain and insecurity and all of it that just was like weirdly healing to me. And so that's kind of what I felt like I wanted the movie to be about.
So you said it was broader, I guess. It was more of a comedy. Was that who you were before you realized that you could lean into drama more? Had you wanted to be a dramedy writer, but the business had sort of told you, the money's in comedy, lean more into that?
It was more that getting laughs felt very safe to me. It feels like somebody like gives you a cookie. You know what I mean? It feels like you give the dog a biscuit, like you got the laugh, like bing, okay, now you got the next laugh, bing. So I think it was honestly out of just feeling like it felt safe to me. to get a laugh. Whereas digging into things that were more just darker, raw, and all that, like, that felt scarier to me. So when I basically, after I did those interviews, went and like threw everything away. I mean, literally everything. Not a single line did I keep. And I like started completely over, rewrote the entire script, and then turned it in to Jim Brooks. And I remember thinking, like, this is everything I got. Like, I am really laid bare because this is so, like, I was experiencing that thing where I was like, is it true? Could it be truer? How do I just get, and like experiencing that, like, kind of, where you're just laying it all out, and it's sort of, embarrassment isn't quite the right word, but it's just feeling exposed, like, because you're just saying it all. And I was turning it into my hero, so it was I remember being just like a nervous wreck turning it in, because I went really like, this is the truth. This is all I got, and I don't know how to do, this is what I really want to do. This is what I really want to say. And I didn't know, does anyone else want to say, like, hear that, And, but then it was, he was, his response was great. It was, let's go make it, so.
It's such a lesson that leaning into who you are, it helps you find success on your terms. It gets you the career that you want versus, I guess, writing to the market, which is what I was,
Yes.
we talked about earlier, I was so often encouraged to do, to the detriment of my personal voice and the effort I had to go to get that back. But I just love hearing you essentially discover your voice while working in Hollywood.
Yeah. And, and I don't know that I could have, well, no, I'm positive I couldn't have done it with anyone other than Jim Brooks, because he is so, like, there's no, the word set piece would never come out of his mouth. Like, the word, what's the trailer moment? Like, he would, like, what's the poster? He would never, like, he's really such a purist, So I was really lucky that he was the person that I was turning it into, you know what I mean? Because it could have been, I think a lot of other people probably would have been scared by it, But yeah, but I think also there's something to me about, there was something about that writing process, like when I rewrote it, that also was just like, the experience was wildly different. The experience of creating that versus creating anything else. And I think it's that as both a writer and an audience, I never want to settle into a rhythm. I never, so for instance, like in comedy, like I'm saying, like they, it's every third line is a laugh or whatever. And your body starts to like settle into this, like, okay, I know I'm about to laugh, and you know what I mean? Like, you start to know. And what happens to me is I kind of like lean back and I disengage just a little bit, because the rhythm starts to become expected. And what was so fun with writing that was that I just there was no rhythm. I loved that every time I would start to write a scene, I didn't know what was going to happen. And I was surprising myself, And so that's what I like as an audience. I like to not know whether I'm going to laugh or cry or be shocked, or, do you know what I mean? I like to have absolutely no idea what's going to happen in the next moment. So that to me is the best movie going experience.
So you've directed 2 films. I still think of you as a screenwriter. And even though you're a director, are you a screenwriter in your mind or a director who also writes?
I'm absolutely a writer who directs. I'm absolutely a writer first, without question. And I really direct to protect the writing. I've never directed anybody else's thing, and it's because I don't have the desire to do that. Like, it's more, I think probably everything I'll ever direct will be something that I wrote, and it's just because like I I just want to, like, I want to see through all the little details. And I think I'm also like, also painfully aware after my first experience having something made where it was like I saw it in the theater and like didn't even recognize it, which was so hard. Like I realized that the director has so many choices that they have to make that affect the whole. Like one tiny thing can screw up everything. Like you realize how delicate a movie is, you know? And the director's choices are like you put bad music over a movie, or you put like cheesy music over a scene, and suddenly it's like it's overly sentimental, and you've killed your jokes, and now you've hit too hard, this too hard on the nose or whatever. Like there's so many little things, or the intonation of a line, or like the pacing of the cut, or whatever. There's so many things that I think have to come together for it to work. So that's really like why I direct.
There's a book, What Happens Next, that made the observation that it's an incredibly small percentage of writers who remain writers after they get to direct, that they even go on to primarily not direct their own stuff, that at the end of the day, the business teaches us to hate ourselves as screenwriters because that's how we think the producers think of us. We're just tools in some way. We're disposable. What we really want to be as directors. It's fascinating. We still put director in front of the movie. Not,
Right. Yes.
It's
Yeah.
Steven Spielberg's movie, not necessarily the screenwriter who got sole credit.
Which, by the way, I think is nuts. And I will say, as someone who does both, I think screenwriting is so much harder. So much harder. So much of the heavy lifting is done there. And if that doesn't work, it's never going to work on the set. Like I find it so much harder. So much harder.
Well, we should wrap up this part of the conversation before we get to the seminal piece of art from your life. Can you tease what you're going to talk about?
The piece of art I would love to talk about is a movie by James L. Brooks, who produced my two films, called Broadcast News, that was made in 1987. And basically it centers on three characters in the TV news world, right at this time where news was starting to change, and it was sort of journalism was going from sort of like facts first, like hard-nosed journalism to more sort of like flashover substance, really like trying to get ratings, which I feel like we now know a lot about with like, clickbait headlines and stuff like that. It feels like that's the world we live in now, but there was this moment where it started to shift. And so the movie centers on that particular time in the world, but it really centers on these three just wonderful characters and their relationship. And it's like I was saying, it's my North Star. Every time I sit down to write something, I'm trying to do something like that.
I can't wait to dive into it with you. But one more question before you go. Over the years when we've emailed, I often get the sense that, in fact, I think you've more or less said this, that screenwriters don't talk to each other nearly enough.
Yes.
And I'm curious why you think that is. Is it that we secretly, even though we don't want to admit it, still think of each other as competition? Is it some sort of keeping up with the Joneses where we constantly feel like if we talk about the highs and lows of what's happening to us, that we're going to be judged or embarrassed by somebody else's success? Yeah. Why do you think we don't support each other or talk about these things as intimately as we have today?
I actually think it's more innocent than any of those things. I actually think TV writers do talk to each other, but I think screenwriters don't. And I think it's just TV writers talk to each other because they're all in the same room. And I think we are just used to being siloed and working alone, and there aren't a lot of opportunities for our paths to cross. You know what I mean? I'm sure you talk to a million producers, and so do I, but there aren't a ton of opportunities, so you sort of have to like reach out to other people. You have to make a real effort and probably be more extroverted than most of us are. Most of us, I think, are probably happy just being behind our computer. But recently I've started to produce things, and there has been such a joy talking and working with other writers. Like I'm like, oh, my people, I always feel that. Even like if I'm at a party and there's a writer, I'm like, I just put me in a corner with that person. Like I just think we're sort of a specific species that I'm always just interested in how another writer's mind works and their creative process and all of that. So that's why, by the way, I love that you're having these conversations and doing this, because I know specifically when I started, there was nothing like this. Absolutely nothing. And so it was very, very lonely. Like, and you really felt like you're the only person who's struggling with XYZ, So there's something about like just having, putting these conversations out in the open that I feel like is so, so great. Like, I always feel like nobody sharpens me quite like another writer. You know what I mean? And this is no shade to producers, and Jim Brooks, I think why he has been so amazing is he's a writer too. He's a writer director too. So it's like he's been in the trenches in the same way and understands, like, if you do this, it's going to screw up all this or whatever. You know what I mean? Certain things that we know intuitively. But yeah, no, I the more interaction I've had with other writers, the more I feel like, again, I feel like I'm like birds of a feather. I'm just like happy.
Yes. And as your fear that you explored in Edge of 17, that you're somehow alone in everything.
Yes.
You feel less alone in an industry that really wants you to feel alone, even though it's such a socializing industry. At the end of the day, when you're down, you're alone.
Yes.
So forging those groups to be able to sit around and talk about art is amazing. Even just talking about what you just saw that you loved. Anyway, I'm missing Hollywood a little bit at the moment.
Totally.
Well, thank you so much for the conversation so far. And we'll be back in a moment to talk some more.
Great.
As for you out there listening, thank you so much for spending your time with me here at 5 a.m. Story Talk. If you dug this episode, could you give it a 5-star rating or leave a comment on it wherever you listen to your podcasts? It's a great no-cost way to support what I'm doing here. Don't hit stop yet, though. As promised, there's a bonus episode to come. Kelly Freeman Craig returns to discuss a seminal artwork from her life, Broadcast News, written and directed by James L. Brooks. As Kelly talked about, Jim Brooks is a good friend of hers, so she's going to bring a lot of amazing insight into the craft involved in this film. But to listen to this 5 a.m. Story Talk bonus episode, you're going to need to become a paid subscriber at Apple for a very low monthly fee. Not sure if you're up for that kind of financial commitment yet? I get it. Things are shit right now. That's why trial subscriptions are available at Apple. So give this bonus episode and the many others that are available a test drive. Alternatively, you can head to the show notes and subscribe to my 5 a.m. Story Talk Arts newsletter, where you'll get access to all my podcast episodes early, including every bonus episode like Kelly's. You'll also get access to a ton of other exclusive articles, most of them about screenwriting and writing. This support, your support, helps make 5 a.m. Story Talk possible. Thanks again for being here, Story Talkers. The rest of Season 2 is going to be a banger. I can't wait to share it with you. See you soon.